So let's learn a little bit of one aspect of the mitzvah Talmud Torah, and we'll see where that takes us. So the truth is, what we're going to learn this morning a little bit is, for those that were there Shabbos afternoon, when I was talking about Torah mitzvahs, that shir about Torah mitzvahs, so this is going to be, it's related to that. Again, it's going to stand on its own, and those that weren't there or don't remember, it's all fine. But if you were there and you remember it, so this will, it might fill in some blanks and expand on that. But let's learn like this. So the question that we're going to be dealing with this morning, and we'll go through in halacha and then in machshava what this means and how it relates, is exactly, I'll say the question like this, and I'll explain what I mean. The mitzvah of learning, is that a mitzvah that's related to time or no? In other words, we know that in halacha there's categories of mitzvahs which are related to time. There are time-based mitzvahs, for example. I mean, extreme examples of that, eating matzah on Pesach. Is that particular night, that, once a year, Sheikh Luvan Esrei, and Sukkot, v'chulu v'chulu. Or even mitzvahs that are daily, but are time-sensitive and time-oriented. So, saying Kriya Shema. So there's a zman for Kriya Shema. It's done every day, but there's a zman when you can say Kriya Shema in the morning, and when there's Kriya Shema at night. And other mitzvahs like that. Davening is a mitzvah that's daily, but there's a zman for tefillah, so in Shachris, Mincha, have their zmanim. So is Torah learning something that's related to time? Or is it just, that's what you do whenever you have spare time, but it's not a time element, it's not a time-related mitzvah. You'll see what I mean. So let's take it slow. Take a look at Marmukah number 1. So the Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah, so it's the first chapter of Talmud Torah. The Rambam is defining for us what is the obligation of learning. And so the Rambam tells us that the most basic, bottom line, baseline obligation of learning is related to time. It's something that has to do with time. Says the Rambam, Kol Ish Yisrael, every single Jew, Chayiv Talmud Torah, is obligated in the midst of learning. Bein Ani, Bein Ashir. It's interesting, the Rambam doesn't do this with other mitzvahs, going through of like any things that you think would exempt you, they don't exempt you. Just says everyone's Chayiv in blowing shofar, whatever. But over here he enumerates. Everyone's obligated to learn, whether you're poor, whether you're rich, Bein Shalom Gufa, whether you're a healthy person, Bein Bal Yisur, whether you're unhealthy, Bein Bacher, whether you're young, Bein Shai Zaken Gadol, whether you're very old, Shatash Kaicha, that you're weak. Afilu Haya Ani Hamisparnis Ben Atztaka. Then he goes back, even if you're a very poor person that's being supported by charity, Umachzar Lapsachim, and you're literally, God forbid, a situation you have to go collecting by doors. Afilu Bal Yishu Banim, even if you have a large family and that takes up a lot of time and energy. Chayiv L'Kvay L'Zman L'Talmud Torah. The obligation. So what? Okay, fine. So everyone is obligated to learn. What does learning mean? What's the basic bottom line? So the most bottom line is to set aside a time to learn by Yom U'Balayla. To be kaveh itim, what's called, right? To set aside a time to learn. Some time, doesn't say exactly how long, but whatever it is, a few moments, a few minutes during the day and at night. Those are the two. Have a time to learn, and at night a time to learn. The Rambam goes on. You should know that there were big gedolim chachamim and tzaddikim, that they were lumberjacks and water carriers and even blind. In other words, they had a lot of difficult labor, difficult work to do, and they weren't healthy people. And but they would take this seriously, or learning by the day and learning at night. They were very successful, and they reached the Everest of Talmidei Chachamim. They mechlam atika hashmua, and they go down in history as the Bali Hamasara, those that give over Torah from one generation to the next. So being kaveitim is an important thing. Now this language that the Rambam is using, which is that the baseline of Talmud Torah is to be kaveitim, right? To set a time during the day and set a time at night. Again, he's not making this up, just basic sources. In Marmukah number 2, there's a Gemara Menachos Tzadi Testament days that the Rambam is coming from. The Gemara says, Rab Ami said, Midvar Shal Rabbi Yossi. Again, the context of this statement of Rabbi Yossi is not for now, but says Rab Ami from a certain statement that Rabbi Yossi, the Tana, said, Nilmoid, we can deduce and we could figure out that Afil Loishana Adam Ela Perak Echad Shachris, Uperak Echad Arvis, that if a person learns a little bit during the day and a little bit at night, Kayim mitzvahs lo yomish sefer Torah zemipicha. When it's fulfilled, basically the mitzvah of the Torah always being in your mouth, and that mitzvah of learning is fulfilled by learning in the morning and learning at night. Now, the Rambam didn't just say that a person has to learn a little bit during the day and a little bit at night. The language of the Rambam was l'kvoya lo zman, that it should be mamish set. It sounds like it should be, you could be able to set your watch to it. Like, this is my time to learn. Obviously, situations come up, whatever it is, but l'kvoya lo zman that the Rambam said was, conveys a strong sense of attachment to that particular time. So it's not just, listen, I have time, I spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever a person's schedule allows, at some point in the day and some point at night. But says the Rambam, it's more than that. It has to be, preferably for it to be l'kvoy leizman, that it's every day at this time, every night at this time. So obviously, what's the source for that? Because again, that's if you just to clarify, if you take a look at the third line of the Rambam in the first Maramokim, that was the language. The Rambam said when after he goes through all the different types of Jews there are with all their different situations, says the Rambam, the third line, Chayiv l'kvoy leizman l'talmud Torah, that you have to designate a time for learning, but yom u'b'layla, day and night. So again, the Gemara Menachos in the second source that to show this idea of day and night didn't have that language of l'kvoy leizman to designate a time. It just said that we see from Rabbi Yossi, again, whatever the context was, that if by learning during the day a little bit at night, you fulfill the mitzvah Talmud Torah. But where's Rambam getting this idea from of l'kvoy leizman, that even that time should be very connected to the clock, it should be as much as possible to be consistent with that. So that's the third Marmokim, in Marmokim number 3. It's also a well-known Gemara. It's a Gemara in Shabbos, Lamed Aleph, Amud Beis. The Gemara says, Amarava, B'shah shemachnisim adam l'den. It's a famous thing that after 120, so they go through, everything is unpackaged. But the first questions that they ask you is famous. The Gemara says, they tell you, they ask you, were you honest and faithful in business? And kavati itim l'Torah, did you set times for learning? And asakta b'ribya, the next question is, did you put an effort to get married and have children? And the next question is, tzipis liyeshua, did you look for redemption? Did you anticipate Mashiach? Did you want for Mashiach? And the Gemara goes on, other questions and so on and so forth, and then, from there, everything's clarified. But that language that Rava says, one of the questions is, kavati itim l'Torah, that's where the Rambam is coming from, that it's not just enough, or preferably speaking, it's that the basic, in other words, that the basic bottom line mitzvah Talmud Torah is very much connected to time. Very much connected to time. First of all, it's connected to time that the mitzvah is that during the day at some point and at the night at some point you have to learn. But more than that, even that particular time that you choose for the day and choose for the night, it should be as consistent as possible. That's your time. So it's very time oriented. That's in terms of the bottom line, the basic, the baseline of Talmud Torah. But we know that there is an idea that's in terms of Kfiyas Itim. But beyond that, there is an idea that whenever a person has any spare time, they should be learning, right? Spare time means that you're not involved with business then, you're not involved with family, you have enough energy, you're not eating, so let's say I was Kfiyas Itim. I learn every morning, whatever it is, 7:30 to 8:30, and at night I learn from 9 to 10. So whatever it is. So I have my Kfiyas Itim. But then if throughout the day or throughout the night I find myself with nothing to do, then the mitzvah Talmud Torah then comes back and it kicks in and says, okay, well now you have nothing to do, so open a sefer and learn something. That's the mitzvah Talmud Torah as well. So even that aspect of Talmud Torah, it's interesting, is also, you could also think of that, that next layer of Talmud Torah, is that connected to time? Well, you would think, no, that's not connected. That's just, it's any random situation. If I have nothing else to do, I learn. It's not a time-oriented idea. But that's also not true. That's also a time-based idea. I'll explain what I mean. Take a look at Maramaka number 4. The Gemara says in Menachos Salitesim Beis, it's a famous story. The Gemara says, Shol ben Dama ben Achaisai shel Rabbi Yishmael. So this person, Ben Dama, was the nephew of Rabbi Yishmael. So Rabbi Yishmael's nephew asks him, as Rabbi Yishmael, he asks his uncle Rabbi Yishmael, and he says like this, Kegoy Nani. So I want to give you an example for myself. Shelmadi kol haTorah kula. I've learned Kol Tarakula, I'm good to go. So I know Kol. So we're talking about someone that, you know, to say to a Tana, I know Kol Tarakula. Okay, that says something. Ma'u lilmoid chachmas yivanis. Can I now start getting involved and learning Greek philosophy and Greek culture? Chachmas yivanis. So Karol v'mikra zeh. So Rabbi Shmuel answers to him with quoting him this pasuk: Lo yomash sefer Torah mipicha, that the Torah should not leave your mouth. V'gisa ba yom v'layla. That's what he says. And Rabbi Shmuel explains. Say ubedaik. So now now you have to go investigate. Shah she'ena loy min hayoim, v'loy min halayla, v'lo min b'chachma yivanis. Said Rabbi Shmuel to his nephew, you can learn chachma yivanis if you find a time that's neither day nor night. Things are day, then you can learn chachma yivanis. Now it happens to be there's no such thing as a time that's not day or not night. Even bein hashmashas is a suffix whether it's day or night. There is no such time. It's either day or it's either night. Says Rabbi Shmuel to his nephew, the pasuk says you have to learn Torah day and night. If you could find a slot that's not day or not night, then gesund to hate. So when you read that Gemara and that response of Rabbi Shmuel, it sounds like he's being a little bit sarcastic, a little bit like, you know, basically. I mean, the answer is no. You're not. You know, you have to spend. If you have any free time, don't learn Chacham Yivanis. You should be learning. And he's just saying it in a little bit more of a, I don't know what the word is. It's not a joke, but he's saying it in a little bit like a funny way, a humorous way. It says in Pasuk you have to learn day and night. If it's not day or it's not night, then you can learn Chacham Yivanis. Guess what? There's no such thing as day and not day and not night. So it sounds like he's being a little bit sarcastic or whatever. Yeah, but the Vilna Gaon says not like that. The Vilna Gaon, in his commentary to Shulchan Aruch, the Zagais and Shulchan Aruch, explains that what Rabbi Shmuel is telling his nephew, he meant it seriously. What Rabbi Shmuel is telling his nephew is this idea, is that the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, even beyond Kviyas Itam, it's also a mitzvah which is being generated by time. That every single, the day and night obligate learning. The baseline of that is a little bit by the day and a little bit by the night. And beyond that, it's every single moment of day and every single moment of night, if you have time for it. But it's all being revolving around day and night. So he's not being facetious, he's not being sarcastic, he's not trying to be cute. He's telling his nephew the truth, which is the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is based on day and night. If you can theoretically find a time which is not day and not night, he's saying he means it. Then there is no mitzvah Talmud Torah. The mitzvah Talmud Torah is a mitzvah which is being fueled and sustained and obligated by the reality of time. Time is what obligates Talmud Torah. The baseline of it, the most basic minimum is a little bit of time by the day and a little bit of time at night. But if you have more time than that, then it should be whenever you're available. But what's generating the obligation is the fact that you're living in a universe which has day and night, which is time oriented. And time is what obligates Talmud Torah. That's the Chiddush. And that's what the Gaon, I didn't bring as the Maramakum over here, but that's what the Gaon, the Vilna Gaon, when the Shulchan Aruch records this halacha of being Kavei Itim, of setting aside a time during the day and a time at night, the Gra not only references you the Rambam, which was the first source to quote that halacha, but the Vilna Gaon also references this Gemara Menachos. Because this Gemara Menachos is, again, Rabbi Shmuel's he's not trying to be cute with his nephew. He's saying the truth, that the mitzvah Talmud Torah is a mitzvah which is generated by time. Now, this is a very, very unique thing, because usually when we deal with mitzvahs which are time-oriented, it's not always. It's not every single moment of time generating it. You know what I'm saying? It's like I said, like Kriyishma has its window, Matzah has its window, Sukkah has its window. And those are time-oriented mitzvahs. And then we have mitzvahs of like believing in Hashem, which is nothing to do with time at all. But now we have this being introduced, and again, that's the difference, right? So let's say, for example, Lulav Nitzrik, we all understand it's time-oriented because it's once a year, right? And then you have the mitzvah of Amunah, which is not time-oriented because it's constant. The person always has to believe in Hashem. But now we're being reintroduced to this idea of where you have a mitzvah, which is also always, but it's still time-oriented. And that's Talmud Torah. So theoretically, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is always. Any single moment, if you have the time to learn, you should learn. And if you learn, you're fulfilling that mitzvah. But it's still time-oriented. The fact that it's daytime is what's generating the mitzvah of learning. And then when it goes to nighttime is generating that mitzvah of learning. Now that's a chiddush. We have to figure that out. It's a funny way of thinking about Talmud Torah now. But more than that, there's an even higher level of Talmud Torah, and this is what I spoke about, let's say Shabbos afternoon, where when you get to this higher level of Talmud Torah, then it's like you actually break out of that component of time. Let me explain. Take a look at Ma'ar Mokum number 5. So far so good? Everyone's following? Yeah? Okay. So Ma'ar Mokum number 5. So the Rambam, the Rambam we saw earlier was in the first chapter. So the first 2 chapters of the Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah, he's talking about sort of the basic mitzvah of Talmud Torah, and even to be super successful in learning, but it's all, sort of the basic. In the 3rd chapter of the Rambam, that's when he introduces us to a higher dimension of mitzvah Talmud Torah, which the Rambam classifies and he categorizes what's called Keser Torah, the crown of Torah. And it's a very, this is what I talked about in Shabbos afternoon, it's a very peculiar thing. The Rambam it creates this new construct, this new level of learning, which is called the crown of Torah. But let's see how the Rambam describes it. And you tell me, when we read this, is this a Talmud Torah that is time-oriented or not? You'll see what I mean. Take a look at, again, Ma'ar Mokum number 5. Says the Rambam, Mi shnaso libai. If a person volunteers, l'kayim mitzvah zu kiroi, to fulfill this mitzvah properly. So in other words, it's interesting. The Rambam is telling us is that when it comes to most mitzvahs, it's not up to you to decide whether you want to keep them or not. That's a mitzvah means a command. That's what it means. But it's interesting. Rambam says when it comes to this mitzvah Talmud Torah, there is a level of this mitzvah which you have the right to opt into, to volunteer yourself to fulfill. You don't have to, but if you so choose to, you're motivated, you're inspired to fulfill this mitzvah to this highest level, then kol kavod. You don't have to, but if you want to, you can. What is this voluntary sort of next level Talmud Torah? So it says the Rambam, v'lias muchter bekeser Torah, and if you volunteer for this deeper level of commitment to Torah learning, then you're crowned with Torah, whatever that means. So what does that look like? It says the Rambam, what it looks like is a person who's like, the words are who is completely single-minded focus is learning. There's nothing else that enters his mind. Everything else is completely irrelevant to him. This person is someone that's not thinking about becoming a Talmid Chacham plus being successful in other areas of life. It's completely irrelevant to him. Again, this is a voluntary sort of position that he's putting himself in to be of this single-minded focus, but that's what that looks like. Kachi darko shel Torah, and then the Rambam says famously, Pasam of Teichel, Maimis Rotishta, or Stishan, Chayitzar Tichya, that the person is willing to live, if need be, not that you have to, but if need be, to live even a difficult life, Upatarat Amol, in order for the sake of learning Torah. So the Rambam is introducing again to us this higher strata of Talmud Torah, and the person that is being described that's like living this is someone that's completely dedicated to Torah learning. Now the Rambam then continues, Ma'ar Mokum number 6, and he's talking about within this person, within this category of the crown of Torah, of that full dedication, he talks about like the schedule of the person. What does the time of this person's life look like? So it says the Rambam like this: Aval pisha mitzvah lilmod b'yom v'layla. Even though we already said that the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is time oriented, day and night, right? Ein adam lamed roiv chachmasei al b'layla. It says the Rambam, for this category of the crown of Torah, this person's most of his success in his learning in terms of that highest level is going to specifically be at night. It says the Rambam lefichach, mi yisharoy to lizkes bekeser Torah. If a person wants to reach that highest level, yizor b'kol loiso, that he specifically has to make sure to go out of his way to be up at night. That nighttime should usually, again, as normal human beings, daytime is when we're awake, and nighttime is when we sleep. And even if you're awake at night, you're tired. So in other words, like the energy levels dip at night. Says the Rambam, but if you are in this category of the crown of Torah, then everything is upside down. Everything's upside down. Or not everything upside down, but everything is exactly the same. There is no difference between day and night to you. You're absolutely as invested in Torah learning at night as you were by the day. There is no dip in energy. There's no dip in motivation. There's no... you want to take a nap during the day? Take a nap during... I mean, I remember, like, in yeshiva, he was a great guy. He wasn't healthy. Like, looking back, he wasn't healthy. But I was his chavrusa, and like, and not as his roommate, chavrusa a little bit. We had a chavrusa shafet, like, it was crazy, but it was a little bit, it was nuts. Like 2:30 in the morning, he wanted to turn on the video with me. I was like, okay, my brain was already fried by then, but he was going. I remember he there was no day, there was no night. He would go into his dorm room, like take a nap during the day, and then like his bed was like the plug for the alarm clock was right by his bed. Whenever he would go in, he would knock out the plug and knock it back in. So like even the clock it was like Lamam Hazman. It was Lamam Hazman. And he wouldn't sleep at night. He would take naps during the day if he needed it, and he would take naps at night if he needed it. Now this was completely unhealthy. It was completely unhealthy, and he could only sustain that for a short amount of time until it was not good. It wasn't good. But the Rambam is describing such a lifestyle when a person is holding on that highest level of the crown of Torah, where there is no difference between it's. If I'm tired, I take a nap. If I'm not tired, I'm awake. Like there's no time-oriented thing. Now, for normal people, like a 12th grader, like that's not healthy. You can't live like that. For Chaim Kanievsky or something, or Eliashiv, whatever, people that have gone through their lives and got to that place of the crown of Torah, then there's no difference to a Chaim Kanievsky, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's like, if I have energy, I'm learning. If I'm tired, then I'm taking a nap anyway. Like, there's no difference. But you understand what's going on over here. The Rambam is describing this highest strata of Torah learning, where it's no longer bound to any construct of time. So again, think about the comparison over here. The basic levels of learning, whether it be Kviyas Itim or even beyond, was very much time-oriented. Like, it's time-sensitive. I recognize that it's daytime. I recognize that it's nighttime. Daytime generates the obligation to learn. Nighttime generates the obligation to learn. But it's always, I'm very cognizant of what time it is. And that's what's generating the mitzvah of learning. But says the Rambam, but then at some point you sort of break through to this higher strata, which is called the crown of Torah, and then time is completely irrelevant. Then all of a sudden the learning that you're doing is completely above time. If anything, says the Rambam, you're actually spending more of your energy at nighttime, which is the exact opposite of what normal, healthy understanding of what time is. It's completely upside down. The Rambam says, for example, he continues on by 3 lines into Marmuk number 6. Amr Chachamim, Ein Rina Shel Torah El B'Layla. That the main song of Torah, which is connected to this highest level, is specifically at night. Shneimar Kumi Reinu B'Layla. V'cholaisiv Torah B'Layla Chut Shel Chesed Nimshach Al B'Yayim. A person does this, learning Torah at night, then the ray of Chesed is shone upon him by the day. So what we're seeing over here is a very funny thing, is that the mitzvah Talmud Torah is comprised of 2 components, or sort of 2 layers. You have the basic to Pesach night by the Mishnah, right? Rabbi Seinu Hagi is my Kriyish Moshe Shachar. It's like they're completely oblivious to what time it is. That's that higher level of Torah. So that's what we see in Halacha. Again, that's what we see in Halacha. These 2 layers of Talmud Torah. A Talmud Torah which is time-oriented, and a Talmud Torah which is not time-oriented. So now let's explain. So why is this? Like, what does this tell us about Torah learning? Like, why would Hashem do this? Just to make it complicated. Like, what's the pshat? So take a look at Marmuk number 7. So now we're going to learn some Maharal. Not too complicated. At least, we're familiar with these types of ideas, I think, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Marmuk number 7. So this is a Gur Aryeh in Shmais. The Gur Aryeh it's going on a Rashi. Gur Aryeh is a sefer from the Maharal commentary to Rashi and Chumash. So he's going on a Rashi. The Rashi quotes the Gemara Rashi that the Chol Yaim that every single day when you sit down to learn or whatever, it should be as if you're receiving the Torah right now. Every single day it should be mamash fresh, as if this is the first time you're ever learning. Okay, that'd be very nice. So the Gur Aryeh quotes that Rashi, fine, and he says like Vim Timer, Lama you like why? Why should I just pretend as if the Torah is being given to me today? He says, it's not true. The Torah is very old. It was given to us thousands of years ago. So I have to just pretend that it's not true. Like, why do I have to? I understand that it's like it would be nice to be so inspired every single day, like it's fresh, but like that. But it's not true. It's not true. So it says the Gemara like this: the Torah was not given today. It was given a long time ago. So he says, so it says really what Chazal are trying to tell us is like this: Ki advarim shehim chashuvim b'madrega, things that are very chashuv. Okay, chashuv, not not in terms of like, cover that we give in Israel, but things that are be'etzem, that are that are really transcendent, really elevated things. Ad kil ilu mitziyasim ein neifim tachlas hazman legamri. Time, says the Maharal, is something that the Rebbeinu Shalom created, right? Time is a creation itself. Time constricts. Time holds something back, right? It's either if it's 10:34 right now, it means it's not 10:35. That's the way it is. Like it's something that constricts. So it's something. So anything that's within time is automatically being controlled. It's automatically not dominant. It's automatically not the height, the top of the food chain, because something is controlling it. On its own, it should expand beyond this moment, but it can't, because time is holding it back. So time, something that's bound by time, automatically means that it's not the most dominant thing in the world. It's being placed into that construct, into that that box that's called creation. It was placed into it, and now it's constricted. Now it's held back to it. It's held back by it. So it can't be everywhere. But if you have something that's mamish before creation itself, and it's still, and even after creation, it still holds a little bit of its identity of pre-creation, then already that's going to be something which is not going to allow itself to be constricted to time. It's not going to allow itself to be constricted at this particular moment, because it's bigger than that. It's coming from a higher place. So it says the Maharal like this: things that are very chashuv, things that are that come before creation and are stronger and bigger than creation, than everything of this world, then they're not going to allow themselves to be constricted and controlled by time. The Chayin HaTorah, says the Maharal, therefore that's exactly what Torah is. Torah is something, the wisdom of God, the knowledge of God is something that comes before the world. It comes before creation. It's where creation comes from. And the chiddush of Torah, the amazing thing of Torah is that even after the world is created, Torah still retains it still retains its identity. It still retains its root in coming before creation. And therefore, because of that, says the Maharal, v'chein Torah hi al hazman. Torah, in its highest level, in its root, is above time. L'madrega said Torah ki hazman toil b'shemesh b'tunas ha'gilgal. Time is connected with the sun and the movement and all that stuff. V'atorah l'mal min hashemesh. And Torah is above all of that. V'chol ha'dvar ma'sheim al hazman. Kolin hazman shava. And things that are above time, then they're not. Then every single moment is exactly the same. In other words, when we think of Torah as like the experience of Har Sinai, says Maharal, is like the question started. The experience of Har Sinai is an old experience. It's not right now. It was thousands of years ago. But says Maharal that Torah doesn't recognize such a construct of there being a now and a then and a next. That's a time that's a time reality, and things that are bound by time, things that are bound by time means that something happened now, it didn't happen then, or it happened then and it didn't just happen now. But Torah, which is in its root above time, it's before creation itself. It's where creation comes from. Bereshis itself, which is time itself, comes from Torah. So then Torah is therefore, even when it filters down here, is not going to be. It's not going to be stuck in that way of thinking that it's either now or then and now. When the Gemara says that you have to see Torah as if it was given to you today, right now, it means that what Chazal are trying to convey to you is that what you're doing when you sit and learn, what we're doing right now, is that we're connecting to something, to a reality that comes before time itself. And so time itself, which is, it either happened 1,000 years ago or not, it's completely irrelevant to what Torah is. So it says the Maharal goes on. Yeah.
If Torah is l'mayla b'azman, then even if you found the time, which is layim v'layla, you should still have.
So we'll see. We're gonna get there. We're halfway there. So it takes a little more than not time wise. We'll see. Okay, Marmok number 8. Based on this idea, the Maharal then goes on to explain this highest level of the crown of Torah. Right? Remember, the crown of Torah was like that absolute full dedication, hasmad, like just single-minded focus. Says the Maharal, tzarach she'il adam hasmada b'Torah ma'id. For such a level, person is not a little masmid, like serious hasmada. Ki ein haTorah k'mashar devarim gashmi shem tachas hazman. Because Torah is not one of those things that are like everything else that are post-creation, that are contained by time itself. V'madam noig b'Torah ki'ilu davar zmani, and if a person learns Torah and looks at Torah as if it's a time thing, it's something that's for the moment. That's not reaching this highest level. So in other words, what the morale is telling us is as follows: is that this highest level of Torah, which is the crown of Torah, right, which we establish as something that's not time oriented at all, says the morale is explaining to us that that's reflective of what Torah is in its root. What Torah is in its root, what Torah is in its essence. And what is Torah in its essence? Something that's above creation, before creation, bigger than creation, not something that can be tied down or constricted by creation itself. You can't limit it to a particular moment. You can't limit it to a particular time. So every single day, it's as if the Torah was given to you right now, because even at that level of timelessness means there's no then and now. It's all the same. It's all the same. And so that level of Torah is reflected in this highest level that's called the crown of Torah. But says the morale, as we're going to see in the next piece, the purpose of Torah, though, is not for it to remain aloof, for not to remain in this higher pre-creation crown of Torah, Gevald Gezach. We need people to embody that. And you need people to connect to that highest level of Torah that comes before creation. But the purpose of Torah is what? Is for that light and for that power and that reality of pre-creation, for it to make itself known in creation, for it to conquer territory for this world. So, for example, when Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to Har Sinai, right? We know the famous Gemara says that he goes up to Har Sinai, and the Malachim ask him, "The Torah that you have been," says the Malachim said to Hashem, "You're going to give the Torah to human beings, to Yulud Isha, to someone born from a woman. The Torah that you were mishtashea by, the Torah that you were delighting in thousands of years before creation. That's something you're going to give to a person born from a woman." What's the taina? Why? Evidently by Malachim, like that's the big insult. That's the big insult that you're born from a woman. Like, why is that such an insult? Because we understand that between Zachar and Nekeva, femininity is very much connected to time. The whole lives, when it be Nida and Taras Mishpacha, it's very much connected to Zman. The question of the Malachim to Hashem is, why are you giving a Torah which comes before time itself, which comes before creation? You're going to give that to Yulud Isha? Why? It doesn't make any sense. It's degrading for Torah. So what does Moshe Rabbeinu respond? Moshe Rabbeinu responds, what are you talking about? That's exactly why we're getting the Torah, because we went to Mitzrayim, and we have parents, and we have the Yetzer Hara. We have all these things which are completely constricted by creation itself. That's exactly why we need the Torah. Whereas the Chiddush of Torah is not as something that we can have to sort of like get out of Zman and get out of... No. The Chiddush of Torah is that this is a weapon that Rebbeinu Shem gave us to conquer this world with. That this world should be invested and be infused with depth and meaning, and time should be invested and infused with pre-time. Creation should be invested with a reality that comes before creation. That's the purpose. That's the tachlis. Take a look at Maramaka number 9. And again, this is all reflected in these two levels of Talmud Torah. Torah in its root, these two levels of Torah being something that's above time, or Torah being something that's generated by time. So which one is it? The answer is time means creation. Time means this world. Time means a Yulud Isha. It means you being a human being and being a person that has weaknesses and flaws and so on. And Torah is there as something that's custom made, that comes before all those weaknesses to give you the strength to deal with those weaknesses. So it's like this unbelievable power that comes before any constriction being given to someone who's constricted. But that's the point, that we should be able to navigate this world and deal with all the inyanim of Paray and Mitzrayim, and like Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Malachim. But the reason why we're able to handle all of that, which is within time, is because we're connected to something which is coming from above time. So Torah itself, the halacha of learning, also reflects these two sides, which is that the Rebbeinu Shem is giving us something which is timeless in order to be able to handle all the different ups and downs of time itself. The Torah is a tavlin for the Yetzer Hara, exactly. So take a look at Marmukah number 9. We'll end with this, but this is a Gemara Menachos that sort of sums this up. It's a very interesting Gemara. The Gemara, I think it's Safra in the Gemara, that he's saying like he's like singing praises about Torah, but he's saying it in like a puzzle, and like a code type of way. You'll see what it means. So Safra said, "Yavoy zeh v'yikabel zois mizeh la'am zu." Said Safra that this should come and receive this from this for this. What does that mean? So then the Gemara explains. Yavoy zeh, this should come, zeh Moshe. It's referring to Moshe Rabbeinu. D'chsiv ki zeh Moshe ish. Moshe is called zeh, this one. So this one should come and receive this, v'yikabel zois, and take this. What's this? Said the Gemara, Zutar, that's the Torah. D'chsiv, the zois haTorah shesam Moshe. The Torah is also called zois. So again, Rav Safra said, this should come, that's Moshe, and receive this, that's the Torah, from this. What's this? Zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's referring to Hashem. D'chsiv zeh kelev anveyu. So Moshe, so this should come and receive this from this for this. What does it mean for this? La'am zu, for this nation, that means Elu Yisrael Shnemer Am zu Kanisa. So basically, Rav Safra is saying a very simple point, which is that Moshe gets the Torah from Hashem to give to the Jewish people. But instead of just saying that, this whole poetic thing, this should receive this from this for this. All this word zeh. What's Rav Safra saying? What's his point? Take a look at Maral number 10, the Maral. Tiferes Yisrael and Parak Yud Beis. Says the Maral, HaTorah hi hashlama v'tzura el ha'adam. The answer, it says in Maral, what this Gemara, what Rav Safra is trying to hint to, is what is the purpose of Torah? The Rebbeinu Shalom gave this most amazing thing in the world. And this thing that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us, which is Torah mitzvahs, which is something that comes before any constriction, before any construct of time, it's not much bigger than everything of this world. But what's the point of that? The point of that is for it to be packaged in this world. And that's what says the Maral, that's what the word zeh means. The word zeh means something you could point with a finger and say this. That's something that's very much constricted to time and space. This moment, this particular object. Something that's above the world is not something you could point to. But the fact that the Torah, Moshe, Hashem Yisparach, the Jewish people, Hashem, it's all being referred to with the word zeh is because Rav Safra is trying to convey this point, which is that the purpose of Torah is to take this thing which is bigger than the world and give it to the world. And then everything we experience in this world, which is so small and so tiny, which is called zeh, is now uplifted and deepened by the injection of Yiddishkeit within it. And that's what Yiddishkeit is. What Yiddishkeit is something that's bigger than the world, but somehow something that fits in the world. And every single moment is a zeh moment, but in that zeh moment there's something that's bigger than everything that could fit into zeh. So it says in Maral, Torah, Yashlama v'tzura la'adam. Torah is the perfection and the tzura, the deeper spiritual identity of who a person is. Shunechshav kitzur la'olam, which in turn is really the deeper identity of the whole universe. Pirush lashon zeh nemer al tzura. That's what zeh means. Zeh means when you're pointing to something specific and particular and something small, but you're saying, but there's a deeper element to that, and that's what Torah does. Torah brings a deeper element to it. So go back to what we started. These two layers of Talmud Torah. Talmud Torah is a mitzvah which is on one level time oriented, and on the other hand, it's a mitzvah which is not time oriented. So which one is it? The answer is these two sides of the halacha of learning is reflective of what the purpose of learning is. What's the purpose of mitzvahs? What's the purpose of Yiddishkeit? The purpose of Yiddishkeit is for the Rebbeinu Shalom to give us something which is much bigger than time, bigger than creation, but to use that as a way to uplift creation and to uplift this world. Not to be an aesthetic and to escape reality, but rather to use that gift of pre-creation to deepen the experiences of creation. And that's what Rav Safra is saying. This got from this to give to that, because it's all very specific and it's something very small and tiny. But that small and tiny thing that you could point to with a finger and say this, it's much bigger. It's deepened because it's being infused with something that's much bigger than creation itself. And that's these two levels of Talmud Torah. No, Shosha said the ikar is that we should just appreciate what we're doing. That's mamish. It's mamish it. We do mitzvahs all day. We learn and to appreciate what's going on. Is that we're mamish tapping into something. It feels very small. It feels very, something that we all do. Whatever it is, it's something you can point with a finger. But that which you can point with a finger is really coming from a place that's way, way beyond anything you can point to with a finger. Okay, Shem Shabbos, Shuzech, and Chazik that, and have an amazing day.